Welcome to my story, a tale that still haunts me to this day. One night, I made the mistake of driving down a road that most people avoid. It's a road that many say is cursed, Redwood Road. I had been driving for hours, alone, tired, and just wanting to get home. The road was empty, not a single car in sight, just me, the endless trees on either side, and the dark night. The headlights of my car barely pierced the blackness ahead, and that's when I saw it. A figure, standing on the side of the road. At first, I thought it was just my mind playing tricks on me, but as I got closer, I saw him clearly, a man. His thumb outstretched, waiting for a ride. I was alone, miles away from civilization. No one else was around, and I'll admit, the thought of having some company even for a few minutes was tempting, so I stopped. "Do you need a ride?" The man didn't say much at first. He just nodded and climbed into the passenger seat. I glanced at him briefly. His face was pale, his hair unkempt. But there was something off about him. Something wrong. His eyes, they were hollow, empty, as though there was nothing behind them. But I pushed the thought away. Maybe he was just tired like me. We didn't talk much. He would occasionally glance out the window, but otherwise, the car was filled with an eerie silence. Every so often, I would look over, but he never looked at me, just stared out into the darkness. I tried to make small talk, but he barely responded. His voice was soft, distant. It wasn't long before I started feeling uncomfortable. It was as though the air in the car had thickened. The trees outside seemed to loom closer, and I felt someone watching us. But I kept my focus on the road. I had to. Then, as we approached a sharp curve in the road, I noticed the hitchhiker shift in his seat. His body stiffened. His breathing became shallow. He looked at the road ahead with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "Stop the car, right here, you have to stop." My heart skipped a beat, but I obeyed. I slammed on the brakes, stopping exactly where he had pointed. But then he did something that made my blood run cold. Without another word, he opened the door and stepped out of the car, disappearing into the dark forest. "Wait, where are you going? What are you?" But it was too late. He was gone. Into the shadows. I looked around frantically, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. The forest was so dense, there was no way he could have just vanished that quickly. But when I checked the rearview mirror, he was gone. Completely. I didn't know what to think. I floored the gas pedal, speeding away, my mind racing. I had to get out of there, I couldn't stop. But the further I drove, the more I felt something was wrong. Like the road itself was alive, watching me, following me. Then up ahead, I saw another car parked by the side of the road. A man stood beside it, looking terrified. I pulled over, desperate for some answers. "Did you see him? The hitchhiker? He just disappeared." The man looked at me, his face pale, his eyes wide with fear. He didn't speak at first, just stared at me like he couldn't believe I was asking. "You're not the first one. It happens to everyone who drives this road. Every time. Every single time." The driver told me the truth. This wasn't just a random occurrence. It had happened to other people too. Drivers who picked up that same hitchhiker, only to have him vanish without a trace at the same spot. It wasn't just a ghost, it was something more. The hitchhiker, he wasn't alive. He had been killed on that very road years ago, his body never found. And now he was cursed to roam, to seek out unsuspecting drivers. He had died at that spot, and anyone who stopped for him became part of the curse. I had become part of it, part of the cycle. I had unknowingly driven down a road cursed with death, and now, there was no escape. The vanishing hitchhiker was waiting for the next traveler, waiting for the next soul to get lost on Redwood Road. So if you ever find yourself alone on a deserted road, with no one else in sight, and you see that hitchhiker, don't stop, because you may be the next one to disappear.